So our topic for this afternoon is all about construction of written test. Last time we discussed regarding how are we going to prepare a classroom assessment. No, first what we did is to do a table of specifications. No, on all assessments. No, particularly a mastery or a quarterly assessment, we need to make a table of specification before going into the construction of a written test. So since we are through with the table of specification, I assume that you have already earned some or learned something about how to do the table of specification. And this time, we will move on the construction of written test. No? So, when we talk about constructing a written test, this part definitely will involve no, careful planning and considerations just to ensure no, the effectiveness in assessing the knowledge and skills of our students, of the test takers. No? So that is why um, we need to ensure no, the test effectiveness in assessing the knowledge and skills of our students. So we have several considerations that will be taken into with doing such, no, like constructing a written test. By the way, our significant learning objectives for this topic. In this lesson, you are expected to identify the appropriate test format to measure learning outcomes. And at the same time, you are expected to apply the general guidelines in constructing test items for different formats. Now, uh, moving into classroom assessment. So as what I have said, classroom assessment plays a very crucial role in teaching and learning process. And that is why uh, classroom assessment, we are going to set no, guidelines when we do assessments in the classroom. And, you know, uh, classroom assessment do more than just measure of learning. And that is why it is very important no, to have this in our classroom. This would somehow inform the learners what needs to be learned and to what extent and how to learn them. They also provide the parents some feedback about their child's achievements of the desired learning outcomes. And at the same time, the schools also get to benefit from classroom assessments because learners or the students' test results can somehow provide the schools evidence-based data that are useful for instructional planning and decision making. As such, no, it is very important that assessment tasks or tests are meaningful and further promote deep learning as well as fulfill the criteria and principles of test constructions. And so, there are many ways by which learners can demonstrate their knowledge and skills na? And show evidence of their proficiencies at the end of every lessons that we have conducted in the classroom. Okay, it could be in every lessons, in every unit, in every chapter, or in every subjects. While authentic or performance-based assessments have been advocated as the better and more appropriate methods in assessing learning outcomes, particularly as they assess higher level thinking skills. What else? Written, uh, traditional written assessment methods, such as the multiple choice test, are also considered as appropriate. and at the same time, efficient classroom assessment tools for some types of learning targets. Say, for example, at this point of time, since we are already going back to normal, no, the normal face-to-face classes, no, so the usual assessment methods that most teachers are doing is, of course, no, the multiple choice test. So this is especially true for larger classes, no? And when test results are needed immediately for some educational decisions. Traditional tests also deem reliable, no? And exhibit excellent content and construct validity. So to learn and enhance our skills in developing good and effective test items for a particular test format, we need or we need to go back and review our prior knowledge on different test formats. How and when to use and when to choose a particular test format. That is the most appropriate measure of the identified learning objectives and desired learning outcomes for the subjects that we are teaching, and how to construct good and effective items for each format. So here are some reasons why classroom assessments are very important. Number one, as what I have mentioned a while ago, informing instructions. No? We all know assessments provide valuable information about students' understanding and progress. This will help teachers identify students' strengths and weaknesses, allowing them to tailor their instruction to meet individual needs. And, by regularly assessing students, teachers can adjust their teaching strategies and at the same time provide targeted intervention to support student learning. Second, monitoring student progress. So, uh, we all know, no, assessments help track students' progress over time. And that is what teachers do most of the time, no? During PTC or parent teachers conference, they show off report cards as an evidence of the student progress uh, all over time to the parents. And by collecting data on student performance, teachers can identify, no, trends and patterns and gauge the effectiveness of their instructional methods. And this information enables them to make informed decisions about instructional adjustment, uh, pacing, and remediations. The third one is motivating students. Assessments can motivate students by setting clear expectations and goals. So when students receive feedback on their performance, they gain a sense of achievement and understand areas that requires improvement. So well-designed assessment also promotes student engagement. At the same time, encourage students to take ownership of their learning. The fourth one is guiding instructional planning. So classroom assessments definitely will provide insight into our students' understanding, allowing teachers to plan future lessons effectively. And by analyzing assessment results, teachers can identify areas of misunderstanding or concepts that needs reinforcement. And this will definitely helps them design instruction that addresses specific student needs and promotes deeper learning. The fifth one is evaluating teaching effectiveness. Evaluating teaching effectiveness. Assessment, definitely, as what I have mentioned, okay, assessments will help teachers evaluate the effectiveness of their instructional strategies and curriculum. And by analyzing assessment data, teachers can reflect on their teaching practices and make well-informed decisions about instructional modifications, resource allocations, and definitely professional development needs. Na? And the sixth one is, of course, na, fostering communication with parents and stakeholders. Assessments provide valuable information to share with parents and guardians regarding their child's progress and areas of improvement. There should be a regular communication with parents and teachers, no, about assessment results, because this will somehow promote a collaborative relationship between teachers and parents, and enhancing the overall support and guidance which will be provided to our students. The seventh is meeting educational standard. We all know classroom assessments are essential for aligning instruction with the educational standards and learning objectives. And by assessing students' knowledge and skills, teachers can ensure that their teaching is aligned with the required curriculum, and that the students are progressing towards meeting academic standards. So that's the importance, no, of classroom assessments. These are vital tools for teachers to gauge students' understanding, inform instruction, monitor progress, motivate students, guide planning, evaluate teaching effectiveness, foster communication with stakeholders, most especially the parents, and meet educational standards. So with classroom assessment, this will provide us valuable insights into students' learning and help create a supportive and effective learning environment. So, what are the guidelines or the general guidelines in choosing the appropriate test format? You know, not every test is universally valid for every type of learning outcome. For example, if an intended outcome for a research method classes, no, is to design and produce a research study relevant to one's field of study, you cannot measure this outcome through a multiple choice or a matching type test. So, to guide us on choosing the appropriate test format and designing fair and appropriate yet challenging test, we should ask, no, these questions, these important questions, to come up with an appropriate test format. And number one here is, what are the objectives or the desired learning outcomes of the subject, of the unit, of the lessons being assessed? You know, in deciding on what test format to use generally depends on our learning objectives, on our desired learning outcomes of the subject, of the unit, of the lesson. The desired learning outcomes are statements of what learners are expected to do or demonstrate as a result of engaging in the learning process. It is suggested that uh, we need to look into the previous topic. No? When we are constructing a written test, we need to know first how to make a table of specification. We need to review our previous lessons, which is all about table of specifications. That would be our basis on constructing a written test. And of course, on how to set or write an instructional objectives or intended learning outcomes for the subjects. The second question is, what level of thinking is to be assessed? We are referring now the cognitive level of test questions. I think you remember remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. No? So, does the cognitive level of test question match with our instructional objectives? The level of thinking to be assessed is also an important factor to consider when designing test. As you know, this will guide us in choosing the appropriate test format. For example, if we intend to assess how much our learners are able to identify important concepts discussed in class, definitely remembering or understanding level. So a selected response format such as multiple choice test would be appropriate. However, if we intend to assess our students on how they will be able to explain or apply in another setting about the concept or framework learned in class. So take note of the cognitive level, applying or analyzing level. So we have to consider giving constructed response test formats like essay. So it is important that when constructing classroom assessment tools, all levels of cognitive behaviors are represented, from remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. What else? We have to take also into consideration yung tinatawag nating knowledge dimension. Yung factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognition. So, the third question that would somehow guide us in choosing appropriate test format is that test match and aligned with the course desired learning outcomes and the course contents or learning activities. The assessment task should be aligned with the instructional activities and the desired learning outcomes. It is very important that we are clear about the DLOs, the learning outcomes, the desired learning outcomes are to be addressed by our test, and what course activities or tasks are to be done or implemented to achieve the desired learning outcomes. For example, if we want our learners to articulate and justify their stand on ethical decision making and social responsibility practices in business, then the essay test or a class debate would be the appropriate measures and task for this learning outcome. A multiple choice test may be used, but only if you intend to assess learners' ability to recognize what is ethical versus unethical decision-making practice. In the same manner, matching type items may be appropriate if you want to know whether the students can differentiate and match the different approaches in terms to the definitions of the concepts. The fourth question is, Are the test items realistic to the students? Are the test items realistic to the students? Kung ikaw ba ay kung ikaw ba ay hindi nagtuturo sa klase, would that be ethical for you to have a test which are not form part of the discussion or not form part of the DLOs or the learning competencies? Kung hindi mo pa siya naturo or lalo na kung hindi naman pala siya kasali, no, doon sa learning competencies, then pina-exam mo siya, that is unethical, no? You are assuming your students can go beyond what you are thinking of, or so hindi dapat, no? So are the test items realistic to the students? Meaning, test items should be meaningful, should be realistic to the learners. They should be relevant or related to the everyday experiences. No? They should be relevant or related to their everyday experiences. So the use of concepts, terms, or situations that have not been discussed in class or that they are never encouraged to read, no, encountered or heard about should be minimized, should be avoided. This is to prevent this is to prevent learners from making wild guesses, which will undermine your measurement of what they have really learned from the class. So, moving on, we have the major categories and formats of traditional tests, which are very, very important in a face-to-face classes scenario. And for the purposes of classroom assessment, a traditional test fall into two categories. We have the selected response type, in which the learner select the correct response from the given options. And the second one is the constructed response type, in which the learners are asked to formulate their own answers. The cognitive capabilities required to answer selected response items are different from those required by constructed response items, regardless of content. So specifically, when we talk about selected response test, this will require learners to choose the correct answer or best alternative from several choices. While they can cover a wide range of learning materials very efficiently and measure a variety of learning outcomes, they are limited, when assessing learning outcomes that involve more complex and higher thinking skills. So, selected response tests include multiple choice tests. This is very common used format, in formal testing, and typically consists of a STEM problem, one correct or best alternative correct answer, and three or more incorrect or inferior alternatives, or ang tawag natin dyan, distractors. So we have multiple choice test, we have true false or alternative response test. For this test, it is generally consists of statement and deciding if the statement is true or false. whether the statement is inaccurate or inaccurate or correct, or accurate or correct. And of course, matching type test. It consists of test or two, a set of items to be matched with each other based on a specified attributes. In a constructed response test, this type of test will require learner to supply answer, no, to a given questions or problem. This includes short answer test. It consists of what we call this open-ended questions or incomplete sentences, no, that requires learners to create an answer for each item, which is typically a single word or a short phrase. And this includes completion type. No? In completions type of test, no, where it consists of incomplete statement that requires students to fill in the blanks with a correct word with a correct phrase. And then identification, where it consists of statement that requires the students or the learners to identify or to recall the terms, the concept, the people, the places, the events, the dates that are being described. And enumeration, no? It requires the learners to list down all the possible answers to the questions. And we have essay test. Essay, no, it consists problems or questions that requires learners to compose or construct written responses, usually long ones with several paragraphs. Sometimes there is a requirement you have to write 1,000 or you explain in 1,000 words, explain in 500 words. No? So that's an essay test. No? And of course, problem solving test. It consists of problems and questions that requires our students to solve problems in quantitative or non-quantitative settings using knowledge and skills in mathematical concepts and procedures, no? And or other higher order cognitive skills. For example, reasoning, analysis, critical thinking skills. So, moving on with the guidelines in writing multiple choice test items. So, writing a multiple choice items requires content mastery, requires our student content mastery, writing skills, and time. Okay? Only good and effective items should be included in the test. You know, poorly written test items could be confusing, could be frustrating to our students, and somehow yield test scores that are not appropriate to evaluate their learning and achievement. And so when we do multiple choice test items, we have to consider all these things. Now we have to use a clear and concise STEM. So when we say STEM, the STEM is the introductory part of the questions that poses the problem or presents a scenario. No? So that's STEM. An introductory part of the questions that poses a problem, that poses or that presents a scenario. So it should be written in a way that clearly conveys the questions and avoid any unnecessary or confusing information. So, so write items that reflect only to one specific content or cognitive processing skills. Do not left or use statements from the textbooks verbatim or other learning materials as test questions. Kaso lang, whether we like it or not, nangyayari yan. Kung anong mayroon sa module, verbatim din. Yun ang ginagawa natin. No? nagmamadali na kasi. Uh, the way it somehow being constructed would be same as on the modules and the books. But what would be good is to not just copy and paste no? That statement. I mean, it's better if we gonna paraphrase no? So that we could be able to know if the student understand the specific concept, the specific scenario. Keep the vocabulary simple and understandable based on the level of the learners or examinees. And of course, edit and proofread the items for grammatical and spelling before administrate them to the students or learners. So we have to ensure no, a single correct answer. Each question should have only one correct answer. Avoid including options that could be interpreted as correct or valid, as they may confuse test takers and compromise the validity of the assessment. The third one is make all options plausible. The distractors or the incorrect answer choices should be plausible and similar in length and grammatical structure to the correct answer. This will help ensure the students are truly demonstrating their knowledge and not just simply guessing no, based on the appearance of the questions. And number 4, avoid using absolute terms. What does it mean? We have to be cautious with the use of absolute terms like always, never, only. No? These terms tend to make the correct answer more predictable, which can make the questions less challenging and reduce its effectiveness in assessing higher order thinking. Number 5, keep the options homogeneous. We have to ensure that the options are similar in structure, similar in length, and grammar to avoid giving away the correct answer or might be creating bias. So we have to make sure the correct answer is significantly different from the distractors. Another thing that we have to look into, avoid cues or clues in the options. Somehow, may mga questions na yung binibigay sa bata na ang sagot lang pala nandoon din sa tanong. So, we have to avoid that one. The options should not be provided or should not provide hints or cues that lead the test takers to the correct answer. This should be independent of each other, allowing students to select the correct answer based on their understanding of the content. Number 7, we have to randomize the placement of the correct answer. Avoid consistently placing the correct answer in a particular position, always in the first option or always in the longest option. Randomizing the order of the options help minimize the impact of guessing and encouraging students to engage with the content. No? Huwag niyo ring ilagay sa C. No? Palaging C. Kasi alam na ng bata yung power of C. So next is we have to use realistic scenarios and examples. If applicable, use realistic scenarios or examples in the STEM to enhance the relevance and authenticity of the questions. And this can help students connect the questions to real-world context and apply their knowledge effectively. And number 9, review for clarity and correctness. Okay? So before finalizing the multiple choice questions, carefully review them for clarity, for correctness, and for grammatical accuracy. We have to ensure that the question is unambiguous and that there are no errors or inconsistencies in the wording. And number 10, we have to pilot test the questions. We have to conduct a pilot test with a small group of individuals to identify any potential issues such as confusing or poorly constructed questions. This will allow us to refine, to improve the questions before administering the test to a larger group. So, by following these guidelines, you will be able to somehow create a well-constructed multiple choice questions that would effectively assess students' knowledge and understanding. So, another thing I have already okay, keep options approximately the same length, no? Use plausible distractors. That means that we have to ensure that the incorrect answer choices are plausible and reflect common misconceptions or errors that students may make. This requires a good understanding of students' potential understanding. Another thing, we have to include only one correct answer. So that is why we need to review. Kasi there will be a tendency sometimes na dalawa pala ang nilagay nating sagot, no? That would create confusion. So each question should have a single and ambiguously correct answer. So at the same time, avoid all of the above or none of the above options unless otherwise it is necessary and appropriate. And avoid negatively worded words. Negatively worded questions can be confusing and lead to misinterpretations. If necessary, clearly indicate the negative phrasing, to minimize confusion. And of course, as what I have said a while ago, use consistent grammar and formatting. Keep the structure and formatting of the stem and options consistent throughout the test. This helps students focus on the content rather than deciphering the wording. This is some sample good multiple choice questions. We have here, which of the following is an example of a renewable energy source? Coal, natural gas, solar power, nuclear power. So in this sample questions, option C or solar power is the correct answer as it aligns with the definition of a renewable energy source. The other options, A, B, and D, are non-renewable sources. And these questions assist students' understanding of renewable energy and their ability to identify examples of renewable energy sources. Another sample good multiple choice question. Which of the following is a characteristics of a chemical change? Change in shape, A, B, change in color, change in state of matter, change in position for letter D. So for this question, it assists students' understanding of chemical changes by presenting four options that could potentially be observed during a change. No? And for these questions, it is option C. No? Change in state of matter is the correct answer as it reflects a physical change rather than a chemical change, no? Helping to differentiate between the two concepts, no? The physical and the chemical change concept. Another sample good multiple choice question: who is the author of the novel To Kill a Mockingbird? Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Harper Lee, and John Steinbeck. So for this question, okay, it tests students' knowledge on a specific literary works, no, and its author. So for this question, the correct answer is option C, no, Harper Lee. And the other options are well-known authors, but they are not associated with a given novel, making these questions effective in assessing knowledge of the specific book and author. So another question, sample questions. Which of the following is an example of an abiotic factor in an ecosystem? Plants, animals, sunlight, fungi. So for this question, it assists students' understanding of abiotic and biotic factors in an ecosystem. So it is option C, sunlight is the correct answer, no? As it represents an abiotic factor, which refers to a non-living components of an ecosystem. And the other options are biotic factors, living organisms in an ecosystem, highlighting, okay, the distinctions. Another one is, okay, example. Which planet in solar system is known for its prominent rings? Mars, Venus, C, Saturn, D, Jupiter. These questions test students' knowledge of the planets in our solar system and their distinctive features. So the correct answer here is option C, Saturn. Okay, as it widely recognized for its prominent ring systems. The other options are incorrect and it represents different planets, making these questions effective and assessing knowledge of planetary characteristics. The last sample question here for a good multiple choice question. What is the main function of red blood cells? A, carrying oxygen, B, fighting infection, C, filtering waste products, D, producing hormones. So for these questions, it assesses students
A.
understanding. Yeah,
Sorry.
yes, letter
Sorry,
A.
sir.
Yeah, you're correct. No?
Sumagot.
This question assesses students understanding of functions of different types of blood cell. So the correct answer, Jess, yeah, you are correct. Carrying oxygen. And that would be the correct answer. No? As the red blood cells are primarily responsible for, transporting oxygen to tissues and organs. And the other option represents functions associated with other types of blood cells, helping to differentiate the correct answer. So next is guidelines, no, to creating a matching type items. So again, for the matching type, no, test, it requires uh, learners, no, or students to match a word or sentence or phrase in one column to a corresponding word, sentence, or phrase in another column. So it is appropriate when we need to measure the learner's ability to identify the relationships or association between similar terms. Matching type items is the best. No? They work best when the course content has many parallel concepts. While matching type test format is generally used for simple recall of information, you can find ways to make it applicable or useful in assessing higher level of thinking, such as applying and analyzing. So in this case, again, when we create uh, a matching type items, we have to, again, be familiar with the following guidelines. One of which, we have to use clear instruction. Na? Use clear instructions. May tendency kasi tayo sometimes na nilagay lang natin, match the following sa instruction. Kahit ako, Minsan, kung nagmamadali na, match the following. Ganun lang instruction. That is not appropriate. Tandaan po natin. That is inappropriate. So, we have to use clear instruction. Begin with concise and explicit instruction that clearly state how the matching should be done. Provide a clear format for students to follow. So another one, you have to ensure equal number of items in its column. So maintain balance between the number of items in the left column and the number of options in the right column. And this prevents students from deducing the answers based on an equal distribution. And then another thing, you have to avoid repetitions. Make sure each items in the left column matches with only one option in the right column. So avoid duplicating options to maintain a one-on-one correspondence. And of course, keep options plausible. That means that we need to provide options in the right column that are realistic matches for the items in the left column. So this requires careful consideration of plausible associations to challenge students' understanding. Another thing, and the last one is randomize the order of items. Baka makalimutan mo, randomize the order of the items in both the left and the right columns to ensure, to eliminate any patterns that could give away the matches. So say for example, okay, these are examples of good matching type items. Look at uh, the instruction. Match the following literary device with their definitions. This matching item assists students' understanding on literary devices. And the options in the right column are plausible matches for the devices listed in the left column. And the item tests students' knowledge regarding the definition of simile, metaphor, and personification. So another items, good matching type items. Okay, look at the instruction. Match the following scientists with their contribution. Ayan, with their contribution. So the instruction is very clear. And this test items, will definitely look on the students' knowledge about the important scientists and their contribution. So the matches between scientists and their contributions are accurate and plausible, requiring students to recall and connect specific contribution to the corresponding scientist. Another example, these matching items, the instruction, match the following historical events with their dates. So this matching item assists students' knowledge of regarding historical events and their contributions, and their respective time period. So the matches between events and dates are accurate, and students need to recall the specific years associated with each event. And another example, now match the following geographical features with their descriptions. So these test items look for the students' understanding of geographical features. And the options in the right column accurately describe the features in the left column, requiring students to match the correct definition with the corresponding features. And so another is, ayan, look at the instruction on the line to the left of each country. In column 1, write the letter of the country's capital presented in column 2. Kaso lang, hindi letter. Ayan, may mali na agad, no? Magkakaroon ng ano yan, magkakaroon ng pangalan nito, confusion to. Supposedly, mali lang ako pag-type, no? Pero this is supposedly A, B, C, D, E, no? A is Bandar Seri B Wagon, B is Bangkok, 3 is Jakarta, D is Kuala Lumpur, E is Manila. But mag-ingat tayo sa ganito, no? Yung sinasabi mo sa instruction ay iba sa nangyaring sa reality. So ayan. So importante nga na dapat i-review yung questions. Yan kasi hindi ko na review na siya. So yun, very important na ayan. So naging mali, hindi na siya good. Kasi hindi na nagtugma kung ano yung sinasabi ng what we call this ng instruction doon sa reality ng matching type items natin. So mag-ingat pa tayo sa mga ganito. Nagiging faulty yung matching type items natin. So the next one is on writing, no? Guidelines on writing true or false questions. So when we write a true false questions or items, number one that we have to keep in mind that we have to keep statement concise and clear. No? We have to ensure that its statement is brief, that its statement is focused and easy to understand. Avoid using complex or convoluted sentences that would somehow confuse students. And number two, create statements that are mutually exclusive. No? Each statement should be definitely true or false, not rules, with no room for ambiguity or multiple interpretations. So avoid using statement that could be considered partially true or partially false or trolls. So for number three, cover the range of content. So include a variety of topics or concepts in your true or false questions to assess a broad understanding of the subject matter. And number four, or bullet four, avoid using absolute terms. Be cautious with the use of absolute terms. Nasabi ko na rin yan kanina sa guidelines doon sa multiple choice. Na? Be cautious with the use of absolute terms such as always, never, all. These terms can make statements more predictable and reduce the critical thinking required to determine their validity. And number five, randomize the order of the statements. Present the true or false statements in a random order to prevent any patterns that could aid guessing. Na? Ayan. So, for the true or false questions, may mga variations yan. Na? Mayroon tayong true, false, correction, or modified true or false question. Where in this format, the statement is presented as the keyword or phrase that is underlined. And the learner or the student has to supply the correct word or phrase. Now, say for example, multiple choice test is authentic. The underlined word is authentic. So, if it is incorrect, not correct, the learner has to supply the correct word or phrase. So, ang tawag natin dyan, modified true or false question. Another variation is the yes-no variation. So, in this format, the learner has to choose yes or no rather than true or false. Na? Minsan, ginagawa natin yan eh. Na write yes if the statement is true, write no if the statement is false. That is yes-no variations. Another one is A-B variations. In this format, the learner has to choose A or B, the letter A or B, rather than the true or false. Or write A if the statement is true, and write B if the statement is false. That is A or B variations. So, of course, no, because true or false test items are prone to guessing. As learners, as asked, no, to choose between two options, utmost care should be exercises in writing true or false items. Okay? So, ayan. So say for example, in this case, the Earth revolves around the moon. Ayan. Earth revolves around the moon. True or false? So these questions assist students' understanding of celestial motion. So this statement is definitely false. As the Earth revolves around the sun and not the moon. No? So it tests students' knowledge of the Earth's orbit and the relationship between celestial bodies. Next, okay, the mitochondria are known as the powerhouse of the cell. True or false?
True.
True. Na? This question tests students' knowledge of cell biology. Na? The statement is true as the mitochondria are commonly referred to as the powerhouse of the cell due to the role and energy production through cellular respiration. So it assesses students' familiarity with cell structures and functions. So another statement, all mammals lay eggs. True or false?
False.
Okay, this question assists students understanding about mammalian reproduction. So the statement is definitely false, no? As mammals are characterized by giving birth to live young and not laying eggs. No? And it challenges students' knowledge of animal classification and reproductive strategies. For number 7, the Nile River is the longest river in the world. True or false?
Yes. Ay, true.
The
Hindi
statement is
nagbasa ng
true,
instruction.
yes. So this question tests students' knowledge on world geography. Na? This is true as the Nile River is widely recognized as the longest river with a length of approximately 6,650 kilometers or about 4,130 miles. So it assists students' familiarity with major rivers and their lengths. Now, next, the last statement, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. True or false?
True.
True, yes. This assists students' understanding of genetics and molecular biology. So the statement is true as DNA is commonly referred to as by its full name, deoxyribonucleic acid. It tests students' knowledge of basic genetic terminology and the structure of DNA. So this true or false questions, the sample true or false questions are effective because they cover different subject areas, provide clear and concise statements, and have definitive answer that requires knowledge, that requires understanding to the respective topics. Next is the guidelines of writing short answer test items. Okay, so ito na. So number one, writing uh, short answer, no? Short answer test items. So number one, provide clear and specific instructions. Na? uh, Ilang beses na yun paulit-ulit, we have to clearly state what is expected in the response, such as providing a concise answer, a brief explanation, or supporting evidence. And this will help students understand the required format and the level of detail. Number two, you have to use focused and precise questions. That means that as teachers, we need to craft questions that are clear, that are specific, avoiding ambiguity or multiple interpretations. We have to ensure that questions prompts a targeted response rather than a broad or vague answer. Number three, specify the desired response length. So clearly indicate the expected length of the answer, such as a single word, a phrase, a sentence, or a brief paragraph. So this helps students understand how much information to provide and prevents unnecessarily long or incomplete responses. Another thing, avoid leading or biased questions. You have to ensure that the question does not imply a particular answer or favor a specific perspective. You have to keep questions neutral and unbiased to allow for objective assessment. Another thing that we have to keep in mind, we have to be aware of possible alternative correct answers. You have to anticipate different valid responses students might provide. Consider accepting alternative correct answer as long as they demonstrate the desired knowledge and or understanding. So number 6 bullet, provide clear or relevant context. No? If necessary, we have to include relevant context or background information to help students understand the questions and provide a well-informed response. However, keep the context concise to focus primarily on the main question. And then number 8 bullet, pilot test the questions. Before using the shortest answer test items in a formal assessment, you have to conduct a pilot test with a small group of students to identify potential issues, ambiguities, or difficulties. This will allow teachers not to refine the questions and ensure their effectiveness. So when we follow these guidelines, we will be able to create well-constructed short answer test items that effectively assess students' knowledge and understanding. So say for example, in this case, another thing that we have to keep in mind, we have to omit only significant words from the statement. So say for example, we have a faulty question. Every atom has a central blank called a nucleus. The good short answer test is every atom has a central core called a blank. No? So in item 1, the word core is not significant word. So the item is also prone to many and varied interpretations, resulting to many possible answers. So you have to omit only significant words from the statement. Na? So then another things that we have to bear in mind, do not omit too many words from the statement such that the intended meaning is lost. So we have here sample statement, short answer test items, which is faulty. Blank is to Spain as the blank is to United States and as blank is to Germany. This is a faulty statement, so make it as good as like Madrid is to Spain as the blank is to France. Na? So uh, the item number 1, the faulty statement is prone to many and varied answers. For example, the student may answer the question based on the capital of this country and based on what continent they are located. However, in item 2 is okay, preferred because it is more specific and it requires only one correct answer. So, what else? Avoid obvious cues to the correct answer. Say, for example, in this case, Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law in 1972. Who was the president during the period? So, the answer is already in the question. So, we have to rewrite that one. The president during the martial law years was blank. Okay. So, next is the guidelines in writing essay. No? We all know, no? Teachers generally choose and employ AC test over other forms of assessment because AC tests require learners to create a response, no? Rather than to simply select a response from among alternatives. And they are preferred form of assessment when teachers want to measure learners' higher order thinking skills, no? Particularly in their ability to reason, analyze, synthesize, and evaluate. So they also assess learners' writing abilities, and they are the most appropriate for assessing learners' understanding regarding the subject matter content, the ability to reason with their knowledge about the subject, and problem solving and decision skills, no? Because items or situations presented in the test are authentic or close to real life experiences. However, alam naman po siguro natin, no? May chat GPT na ngayon. Kaya kung online classes tapos nagpa-AC test ka, minsan hindi na ako naniwala. Kaya hindi na ako nagpa-AC na kung online ang class ko kasi may chat GPT. Nagpa-AC na lang ako kung face-to-face classes. At least nakita ko yung mga estudyante ko. Walang gamit na cellphone. They are constructing their own reasoning. Okay, based on their own knowledge, na their based on their stock knowledge. Okay, and then another thing, we have to clearly define the intended learning outcomes to be assessed in the AC test. Refrain from using AC test for intended learning outcomes that are better assessed by other kinds of assessment. And clearly define and situate the task within the problem situation, as well as the type of thinking required to answer the test. And of course, no, present tasks that are fair, reasonable, and realistic to students. And be specific in the prompts about time allotment and criteria for grading the response. So the last is the guidelines in problem solving items. So when we are doing problem solving test items, you have to keep in mind that these particular test items are used to measure learners' ability to solve problems that require quantitative knowledge and competencies and our critical thinking skills. And these items present a problem situation or task that will require learners to demonstrate, or to work on procedures to come up with the correct solutions. So full or partial credit can be assigned to the answers depending on the answers or solution that is being required or presented. So of course, there will be variations also of the quantitative problem solving items. So mayroon tayong one answer choice, and this type of questions contain 4 or 5 options, and the students are required to choose the best answer. So another variations is the all possible answer choices. This type of questions has 4 or 5 options, and students are required to choose all the options that are correct. And type in answer. This is another variation of problem solving test item. Type in answer. In this type of questions, this type of question does not provide options to choose from. Instead, the learners are asked to supply the correct answer. So the teacher should inform the learners at the start of how their answers will be rated. For example, the teacher may require just the correct answer or may require learners to present the step-by-step procedures in coming up their answers. So on the other hand, for non-mathematical problem solving such as case study, the teacher may present a rubric of how their answers will be rated. So what else? So these are examples of problem solving items na. Ayan. This is a sample of faulty problem solving items. A construction worker needs to determine the volume of a rectangular prism. The length of the length is 5 centimeter. The width is 10 centimeter and the height is 12 centimeter. Calculate the volume. So this problem solving item is faulty, considered faulty because it does not provide any clear instructions on the formula or method to be used for calculating the volume of a rectangular prism. So in this case, it assumes that the students knows the formula, no? And the correct procedure for calculating volume. And without explicit instruction, this may lead to confusion and inconsistent responses. Okay. Okay lang kung naturo mo na yung formula on how to calculate the volume of a rectangular prism. And then you are just trying to look into and to look into how they solve this particular problem. You want them to know if they are exactly if they still exactly remembering the formula on the volume of rectangular prism. So that would be okay. But if it is not okay, if you are trying to measure na, you are trying uh, to conduct this test to students who do not know about the calculation, the volume of rectangular prism. You need to provide the formula. That is why this is considered as a faulty problem-solving item. This problem-solving item is considered as good, no? Because it provides a clear problem scenario and specific instruction on what needs to be calculated. No? Very specific. A company wants to ship a cylindrical package with a radius of 7 centimeter and a height of 15 centimeter. Calculate the volume of the package and determine if it will fit in the shipping box with a dimension of 20 centimeter by 20 centimeter by 30 centimeter. So it also includes relevant dimensions and ask the students to determine if the package will fit in the shipping box, no? Adding an additional element of problem solving. So in this item, in this question, it assesses the students' understanding of volume calculation and their ability to apply it in a real world context. So that's all, no? I hope you have learned something from me this evening. So, which is all about construction a written test. So that's all. Thank you. Good evening. It's already
Okay, sir.
7:56. Bye-bye.
Opo. Thank you,
Thank you,
sir. Good
sir.
evening. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye-bye.
Mm.